For 3 months, Meredith Langley treated my farmland like her personal shortcut, cutting through my property in her gleaming white SUV as if the dirt road slicing across my tomato fields had been paved just for her. I had asked her politely at first to stop. Her response: a smug smile and a dismissive, "Oh, don't be difficult. Everyone uses this road, and your grandfather never minded." Well, I wasn't my grandfather. My name's Tyler Morgan. 6 months ago, I inherited 15 acres of farmland from my late grandfather, a quiet patch of green resisting the creeping claws of suburban sprawl. The dirt path that ran across it had always been private. My grandfather tolerated the occasional car, but things had changed. Meredith, the HOA president of the neighboring Maple Glen community, decided my land was now public property, specifically her personal express lane to the highway. The first time I met her, she was tapping perfectly manicured nails on the hood of her Mercedes, pretending not to notice that she had just clipped my fence. She called it a minor inconvenience, said her shortcut was a long-standing community practice. I told her, with equal politeness, that this was private land and that I'd appreciate it if she stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Morgan, I'm sure someone new to the area might not fully understand suburban harmony, but let me give you some friendly advice and stir the pot. Things work better when we all cooperate." I smiled. "Sure. Just let me know if you'd prefer I put up a fence or dig something deeper." Her response: "Try it, and my lawyer will be on you before you finish the first shovel." What she didn't know was that I had a degree in geological engineering, access to drilling equipment, and a very detailed understanding of municipal code. And she just poked the wrong bear. That night I pulled out the property deeds and maps. The dirt road had never been zoned as a public easement. Every car that drove over it, us included, was trespassing. I thought about gates. But Meredith was the kind of person who'd sue over the shade of brown paint on a fence post. I needed a better plan, something legal, subtle, and utterly devastating. My farm needed irrigation. The soil under that shortcut had perfect composition for a well. So I filed for permits above board, for agricultural improvements, and scheduled the dig. My contacts from my old engineering job were happy to help. All I had to do was mark the coordinates and wait. Days before the drill crew arrived, I received a thick envelope from the Maple Glen HOA citing violations. My tomato rows were disorderly, my grass was non-conforming, and my barn, apparently, was aesthetic pollution. The fine structure read like a luxury resort menu if the entrees were absurd penalties. I laughed. The timing wasn't a coincidence. What really drove it home was what old Hank, my neighbor, told me over coffee. "That Meredith woman. Your granddad made her life hell. She's a former attorney, tried to sue him for road access years ago. Lost in court and never got over it. Now you're just the next chess piece in her game." But I wasn't playing by her rules. 2 weeks later, with permits approved, my drilling crew arrived. We positioned the rig directly in the middle of Meredith's so-called shortcut. Legally. Permanently. She was out of town for a conference. Perfect. We dug a well 4 meters deep, reinforced, and functional. Then, at Hank's suggestion, we covered it with plywood disguised to match the dirt road. Safety. We had it roped off initially. But the signs had a tendency to vanish whenever her HOA lackeys made their rounds. On a Monday morning just after sunrise, I was pouring coffee when I heard a sickening crunch followed by a splash and a long, mechanical wail. I stepped outside to find Meredith's SUV nose down in the irrigation well. Steam rising, on stock, her perfect white Mercedes looking like a drowned yacht. Meredith, soaked and stunned, stared up at me through the windshield like she was trying to comprehend gravity for the first time. "I'm calling 911. I shouted, trying very hard not to grin. Rescue crews arrived. She was unharmed, but humiliated. Her briefcase had exploded open inside the vehicle, soaking dozens of papers in muddy water. When one firefighter fished out what looked like real estate contracts and forged documents referencing access rights, he handed them to the sheriff. "Ma'am," the sheriff said, flipping through the pages, "we're going to have some questions." Meredith exploded. Accusations: flu sabotage, attempted murder, agricultural terrorism. She screamed about suing me into oblivion. The sheriff calmly pointed to the posted permit. "Drilling a permitted well on your own land isn't a crime. Driving through it without permission is." A local journalist named Alene Fox showed up, camera in hand. She'd been investigating HOA abuse for months. The headline wrote itself. By noon, social media had lit up. Neighbors shared their own horror stories, fines for mailbox collars, threats over garden gnomes, cease and desist letters for porch lights. Meredith had ruled the neighborhood with an iron manicure for too long, and her crown had just sunk 4 meters underground. That week, an emergency HOA meeting was called. I was invited not as the defendant, but as a witness. I showed up with documentation, permits, video footage, and court records proving Meredith's trespassing and past legal losses. One by one, neighbors stood up. The story of her forged documents. Confirmed. Harassment. Widespread. Abuse of power. Unmistakable. The board voted her out. Unanimously. Days later, she showed up on my porch alone, makeup-free, and without her usual air of invincibility. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. A rare thing these days. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was an admission. She wrote about how she'd built her identity around control after her divorce. How she'd used the HOA to fill the hole her family left. The resort plans weren't about greed, they were about trying to create something permanent in a world that kept changing without her permission. But in doing so, she wrote, she'd become exactly the kind of person she once despised. I didn't forgive her. But I understood her. I didn't dig another well. Instead, I built a footbridge across the drainage ditch where the shortcut used to be pond to neighbors, close to SUVs. We called it Morgan's Crossing. No easement required. Funny thing is, after the dust settled, the community got better. With new HOA leadership focused on people, not punishments, the neighborhood started to heal. I kept farming. I stayed stubborn. And no one tried to drive through my land again. Meredith moved. The well remained. And sometimes I still catch people stopping at the edge of it, looking down, and realizing just how deep the truth can go when someone finally decides to dig.